Pastor Ed here with my 5 for 5 daily devotions, this one for Thursday, November the 17th, 2022. This week we've been talking about wisdom, specifically about King Solomon and the fact that when God asked him what he wanted, he could have had anything. He asked for wisdom and understanding and discerning mind. A fellow by the name of Tim White once wrote, "When I was a boy, my dad asked me if I could have one wish be granted, what would it be?" Well, we played that game as a family. He says, every time my brother or one of my sisters thought of a better wish than I thought about, I would change my wish. Well, then my dad unplugged all the fun by coming up with what we determined to be the greatest wish ever. He said, I wish that every wish that I wish would come true. The unending wish, one wish that grants all other wishes, that would be it. Well, through the years, I've contemplated how tragic that would have been, he says. For instance, my fifth grade teacher would have exploded in front of all of us students. The school bully would have come upon a tragic end to teach all other bullies, and I would have been a murderer. A rich, greedy, spoiled murderer, but I would have in my anger wished some people to death. Well, no wonder the book of James warns us, you desire and you do not have, so you murder. You covet and cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. You do not have because you do not ask. You ask and do not receive because you ask wrongly, to spend it on your passions. Somehow, without the Apostle James meeting me, he knew of the wickedness that lived in my heart. Solomon, the author of the great book of Proverbs, was given the opportunity to make one wish by God. What's the most valuable thing in the world? What would God consider the most valuable? Consider God for a moment. What is the value of gold to God? Zilch. Money, fame, popularity, oil wells, all of these are nothing to God. Everything that you can mention that we value, he could create with the puff of his breath. What does God say the most valuable thing in the universe is? Wisdom. And part of the story of Solomon is recognizing that he was able to discern where God was leading him. It wasn't just about getting something for himself, but how God was calling and leading him. Back in the mid-1940s, Philadelphia congregation watched as 3 9-year-old boys were baptized and joined their church. Well, not long after, unable to continue with its dwindling membership, the church unfortunately had to sell the building and they disbanded. Well, one of the boys was Tony Campolo. You might remember me mentioning him. He became an author, a Christian sociologist at Eastern College, a well-known speaker. And he remembers years later when I was doing research in the archives of our denomination, I decided to look up the church report for the year of my baptism. There was my name and Dick White's. He's now a missionary. And Bert Newman, now a professor of theology at an African seminary, was also there. And then I read the church report for my year. It has not been a good year for our church. We've lost 27 members. 3 joined, and they were only children. That congregation, their wish, their dream, their desire, probably like most congregations, was to grow and prosper, maybe be an impressive congregation. But that didn't happen. Apparently, they were instead called by God to do something else. And in this case, to lift up 3 young boys who then went on to significant ministry in their adult lives. And so, as Mark Eberly writes, never underestimate the power of calling upon people's lives, whether individually or even as a congregation. God calls us to life-changing encounters. Something happened in that little dwindling church to those 3 boys who were baptized that day, didn't it? He calls us to salvation and to be holy. God calls us to ministry and service. And if you're truly blessed, God calls you or someone you love to full-time ministry. That's what happened in the case of those 3 young boys. Something wonderful that happened within that small, struggling congregation that probably never realized the seeds that were planted in their lives. And if they did or could, they could look back and see what a wonderful thing they had done. Never underestimate the power of God's call. Well, have a great day. We'll talk with you again tomorrow. Until then, bye.